Last week, the Detroit Lions got a huge confidence boost when they went into Arrowhead on Thursday night and beat the Kansas City Chiefs. But this week, they got a humiliation factor of humble pie when they got beat by the Seattle Seahawks at home. We're going to talk about this loss in today's episode, folks, so stay tuned.
It started with an owner who had a last name fans despised, hiring a coach that the experts thought was crazy,
But I got a plan, I swear to you.
who traded for a QB that was said to be washed up. They said the Detroit Lions would never amount to anything, that it would always be the same old Lions. But this team, our team, has a new identity, defined and expressed by the crazy head coach,
Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes, I will beat your ass.
led by the QB that nobody thought was good. Motor City Mania is in full swing and ready to start. So join the show and be prepared for kneecap biting, because Motor City Mania starts right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to MCM, Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and we're getting set to dive in right now. So, I just want to say to everybody, welcome back to the show. Welcome back. Thank you all for your view. Thank you all for your patronage. Thank you all for your support. Just want to keep encouraging y'all to please to subscribe to the channel, watch the content all the way through. Please hit that like button, and just want to say, God bless. Now we're going to get into today's content. So, here's the thing, folks. As the title says, the Detroit Lions were humiliated. We were embarrassed. And not in the sense of, Seattle came into Detroit and absolutely spanked us. It's not that kind of a humiliation. It's not that kind of an embarrassment. It's the kind of an embarrassment, it's the kind of humiliation that, much like my title image, my thumbnail image is saying, it was gut-wrenching. And the reason why is because this was a game that everyone, and I mean it, everyone thought that the Lions were going to win. I mean, if you go back to earlier in the week, the Lions were, if I recall correctly, 5.5, they were 5.5 point favorites in terms of being able to beat the Seattle Seahawks. And I mean, if you thought about it from every possible logical perspective, it just looked like the Lions were going to lock this one up. We had just, as I said earlier in my intro, we had just beaten the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead, the defending Super Bowl champions in Arrowhead on Thursday Night Football. That was a big thing. We had just done all that, and it looked like, hey, we're coming into this game extremely healthy, we're coming in confident, and it looks like we're on the right track. However, though, I think that one of the biggest problems is I think the Lions came into this game too confident, including myself. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of talk about this game, kind of stepping back a little bit, but still using a microscope to kind of go over the finer things of this. And as the week goes by, up until about Wednesday, we're going to keep looking at this until we can start looking at game film. We can start looking in comparison to what our next opponent, the Falcons, have to offer. So for at least the next couple of days, we're going to start getting much more specific as to what went wrong. But right now, we're kind of going over a generalization factor of this game. So let's kind of go through this a little bit. Let's go back in time a little bit here. If you all remember, literally, if I recall correctly, it was like a day just before we were supposed to play the game. That's when the Detroit Lions make the announcement that they are unveiling Barry Sanders' statue. And that was a big deal because it's like, listen, the Lions had never done that before. The Lions had never purposely had commissioned the building of a statue for one of their team's great players. And it's not like the Lions haven't had great players in the past. They've had plenty of them. Barry Sanders was the first one that they actually decided to make a statue for to commemorate his career. And again, this was kind of a big deal because if you consider all the other things that had been going on that week, it was believed that the Lions were primed to win this game. Everyone believed it. All the analysts had agreed on it. Everybody was like, yeah, the Lions are favored to win. They're going to be at home. They're coming off of a huge road win against the Chiefs, and the Seattle Seahawks are coming off a very embarrassing, humiliating loss against the Rams at their home place. And I mean, you think about it from another perspective. Again, other than the fact that Barry Sanders had just been honored, so the home crowd was very hyped up. The home crowd was very, being all for Barry Sanders. it was also because the Lions crowd was also just very raucous. I mean, you're talking about a home crowd that was extremely loud, extremely excited to see their Lions play at home for the first time in the year. So you have that going along with the whole Barry Sanders statue. And then you're talking about, as I've said before, the Lions were coming into this game at nearly full strength in terms of injuries on both offense and defense. The only starting talent on the offense and defensive side of the ball, really, that wasn't playing due to injury was Taylor Decker and Emmanuel Mosley. That was it. Whereas the Seattle Seahawks were banged up and they were coming off of a dismal loss to the Rams. I mean, you talk about the injuries that the Seattle Seahawks had coming into this game. They didn't have either their starting tackles. They didn't have either their starting defensive ends. They didn't have their starting linebacker. They didn't have their starting safety, Jamal Adams. Like, they were coming into this game really banged up. And yet, despite every clear advantage being given to the Lions to win this game, the Lions still found a way to lose. And I'm going to say this right now. I hate bringing this back up because I have fought so long against this through the YouTube community, at least for the Detroit Lions. But I already know that the sentiment of SOL, same old Lions, is now back alive and it's roaring back because this is what SOL fans do. As soon as the Lions lose a game that everyone believes they should have won, they would have won, they could have won, and they don't win, and then they lose it in a fashion that kind of befalls the same old Lions mindset, they instantly come back. And it's just like, okay, here, we need to kind of back up here a little bit, and we need to actually kind of put some things in perspective here, because I'm sorry, SOL fans, y'all need to calm down and stop thinking that the Lions have reverted back to their old selves, and regular fans need to step up and remind this to them, and at the same time also keep calm and realize that, you know what, as much as I hate to say it, the Lions, I think, needed to lose this game, because if we'd have won this game, I think it would have done more damage than good, at least in terms of our official mindset going forward. I would have loved to have won. Don't get me wrong. I love winning. But I think the Lions kind of needed to get themselves knocked back into reality a little bit here. So that's what I'm saying. And I'm gonna explain my meaning, my thought process here in a moment. So let's first and foremost understand the statistical breakdown as far as what I think is important here. Let's take a look at the offense here. The offense did exactly what I thought it was going to do. The offense went out, it performed well. It pretty much, for the most part, sliced through Seattle's defense like a hot knife through butter. And if you take a look at the statistics about what these players did, hell, if you just watch the game, you'll know exactly what I'm saying. But let's take a look at the statistics to actually back up what I'm saying. If you go and you actually check this out as far as what the statistics show, this was Jared Goff's stat line from yesterday. He was 28 of 35, which that is 80% completion rate. He had 323 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have the 1 interception, but his QBR ranking, according to ESPN, 78.6. His passer rating, 121.8. Jared Goff had about as good of a game as you could possibly imagine against the Seattle defense. Now, again, a lot of people are going to try and say, well, David, they didn't have their starting defensive ends. They didn't have one of their starting linemen, or starting linebackers, and they didn't have their starting safety. I understand exactly what happened there, folks, but understand something here. As we were going through the game, we were getting banged up just as bad as the freaking Seattle Seahawks were banged up coming into this game. So injuries you can't use as an excuse. I'm not going to use them as an excuse for our team. It's just, hey, that's part of the game. Next man up mindset. So Jared Goff yesterday had an absolutely stupendous game despite even having the 1 interception. And that wasn't really on Goff. Even Dan Campbell said that was more on the route runner. So, moving off of Jared Goff, let's go to David Montgomery. Before Montgomery got injured and got taken out of the game with a thigh injury, he had 16 rushes for 67 yards, getting over 4 yards a carry. And I mean, if you watch the way that guy ran, he was picking up extra yardage because of how hard he wanted to run the ball. He also had a rushing touchdown and 1 reception for 7 yards. So again, David Montgomery was having a very good game until he got injured in the third quarter. So there was still, if I recall correctly, about a quarter and a half before he got injured, as far as the end of the game. Then you take a look at the receiving options. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 6 receptions, 102 yards, 17 an average a catch, folks. Like, come on now. Like, Amon-Ra St. Brown was playing an absolutely stupendous game, and on top of that, that was his 7th 100-yard receiving game in a very, very short 3-year career. This is his 3rd year in the NFL. So Amon-Ra St. Brown has continued to re-solidify and cement his legacy as already being one of the best wide receivers in the game at a very young age. After St. Brown, the next big wide receiver is Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds, the start of this year, has already come out and he looks absolutely fantastic working with Jared Goff. And the stat line proves it again when you talk about yesterday. Josh Reynolds yesterday had 5 receptions, 66 yards, 13.2 an average a catch, and had 2 receiving touchdowns. Josh Reynolds has just looked like he's been, again, reborn. Now that he looks healthy, he looks ready to play, and him and Jared Goff are just absolutely having fun out there and showing that having the experience that they've had together is a huge part of why they're so good together. And the final receiver that's of really big noteworthiness is Sam Laporta, the rookie tight end. Sam Laporta was a guy that I was really, really high on when we drafted him, and I was really looking forward to see him continue to progress as games went by. And so far, he has showed very steady progression from the first game to the second game, and I expect to see that as we continue to go by, because in this game, he had 6 receptions, 63 yards, had 12.6 an average a catch. He absolutely is looking the part of what an Iowa tight end is supposed to be, because Iowa has been a tight end factory over the last couple of years. So, Sam Laporta looking really good as a rookie tight end. Then you start getting into the more generic stats as far as an offense. They were 6 of 11 on third down. They were 54.5% converting on third down. However, though, despite being good on third down, they were not good on fourth down, which is an unusual characteristic of a Dan Campbell-led team. Dan Campbell is probably the most aggressive head coach in the NFL and has made a living as far as being able to convert on fourth down. But yesterday, that was not the case. The Lions went for it on fourth down 3 times. They only converted it 1 time, which is 33% conversion rate. And then you take a look at time of possession. You take a look at the final moments of the game as far as the overall accumulation of time. The Lions had the ball in their possession for 30 minutes and 48 seconds, which when you consider the fact that we went into overtime, the Lions had the ball in their possession for still just a little bit under half of the game. So, when you take a look at everything I just stated about the Lions offense, what's the analysis here? The analysis is this, at least for the offense. The offense did its job and did it well. When you score 31 points and having the ball for nearly half of the game, you have done your job. Your offense has made points. Your offense has converted on third down. Your offense has extended drives. Your offense has scored points. It has done exactly what it's supposed to do. And when you score 31 points, you should be able to win a game. So, what went wrong? Well, I don't really have to explain this one to Lions fans, but I'm going to do it anyway. It was the defense. The defense is primarily what went wrong. That's the problem here. Because if you think about it, the defense could not do anything that we thought that it was going to do. Because think about it here, folks. You go back to the game yesterday, and what was the main reason why the Lions couldn't win? It was the defense, and honestly, it was also bad coaching. But primarily, it was the defense, which was a result of bad coaching. And the reason why I can say that is because the Lions' defense was uncharacteristic in terms of what it couldn't do. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. The Seattle Seahawks came into that game yesterday, they didn't have either of their starting offensive tackles. That right there is prime territory for a freaking defensive line like the Detroit Lions that literally had every freaking starting player on it except Josh Pascal playing. That's prime territory right there to go out and get an absolutely stupendous stat line. But yet, despite all that, the Lions' defensive line, their edge rushers, didn't register 1 damn sack. I'm sorry, it's the truth. And here's the worst part about it. Through 2 games, the Lions' defensive line and edge rushers have still not registered a sack, which is absolutely just ridiculous because you have to understand something here. This is a unit that was touted as one of the best units on the team, and particularly for the defense coming into this year because of all the talent that we did have on that unit for the defensive line and edge rushers. It was deep. It had a lot of talent. But yet, so far, we have not gotten the production out of it that a lot of Lions fans, this one in particular, was expecting to find. So, when you take a look at that right there is something that's very disturbing. That's something right there that's very humiliating, very embarrassing. Because it's like, listen, you have a prime candidate chance to go out and make an impact because The opposing team doesn't have their starting offensive tackles. They're using backups. But yet you still can't get a sack. That's an embarrassment, especially considering the talent that we have on that defensive line and edge rushing unit. But it gets even worse when you think about the fact that the Lions this offseason went out and put so much effort and put so much money into reinvesting and rebuilding the defensive secondary. Think about it, folks. How did the Seattle Seahawks offense beat us yesterday? It wasn't because they were running the ball down our throats. It was because they were throwing it all over us. Geno Smith once again had himself a career game. He had over 300 yards passing. He had 2 touchdowns to no interceptions. And again, his passer rating and his QBR ranking were through the roof. And that's because our defensive secondary that we signed a whole bunch of free agents to, that we drafted players to, could not freaking stop Geno Smith and that Seattle Seahawks offense. And they did virtually the exact same thing they did last year to us. That's why this is so embarrassing, because it's like, listen, the Seattle Seahawks didn't do anything different than what they did last year. And they came in even further shorthanded than what they were last year. So it's like, okay, you didn't change the script, Seattle. You did the exact same thing on offense that you did last year. And at the same time, you were shorthanded on both offense and defense. And to Seattle's credit, again, I commend them. I applaud them. They were facing a lot of adversity, and they still came in and they got the win. They deserved that win. They earned that win. They took that win from the Lions. That's to be commended. That's why I say what I say about Seattle. And that's why I say what I say about the Lions. It was an embarrassment. It was a humiliation to the Lions because they had the game all wrapped up, according to every analyst. Every freaking Lions podcaster, including this one, was like, dude, this should be an easy one for the Lions. They've got everything going in their corner. Everything's going their way. So for me, here's what I'm going to say about this. Because again, like I said, SOL fans right now are just licking their chops. They're just absolutely going all cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and just being like, oh, well, this is the same old Lions. This is what they... No, this is not the same old Lions. Cut that nonsense out. Not even close to the truth. This is a team that is still built on being resilient. This is still a team that's built on being tough. This is still a team that's built on being gritty. This is not at all like the teams of the past, like Caldwell or Schwartz. So forget it. It's not that team. Because let's think about it here. This is a team that was down by 10 points in the fourth quarter, still found a way to get those 10 points to tie and go into overtime at the very least. Most Lions teams in the past would not do that. The problem was, again, the defense didn't show up and the coaching for the defense didn't do its job, which realistically, that's an easy fix right there. We just got to figure out who's the one that needs to get changed in that regard. And we'll talk about that in my other episode later today. But here's what I'm going to say to kind of wrap this episode up really quickly. The Lions suffered a setback yesterday. There's no denying that. But again, as I said earlier, I believe that the Lions needed to kind of recorrect themselves here because it's like, listen, for the last 10 days after the Lions had won, after the Kansas City Chiefs game, everyone was singing the praises of the Lions like, oh my God, the Lions, they're actually doing something now. They're actually doing this. They're actually doing that. Blah, 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 blah. We heard it from every major TV sports analyst. We heard it from every major sports network. Everybody was saying it. And again, I'm not one to believe that the players let that get into their heads because they didn't allow it to get into their heads when they were being talked down all the time. But I think that the Lions had to kind of have this moment happen sooner rather than later to kind of keep them on the right track. Because it's like, listen, after a while, you start hearing that for a while, you might actually start believing it. I think the Lions needed this loss as much as it was a gut-wrenching loss to keep them on the right track going forward for the other 15 games of the season. It's like, listen, we're never going to get too high to let ourselves get in our own path. We're not going to let ourselves get so big that we can't think we can't possibly lose. Because, again, I've said it before, I'll say it now again, and I will say it again in the future. Anybody can be beat on any given day. Doesn't matter what the circumstances are. And just like what happened with the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 1 to the Lions, it happened to the Lions last night against the freaking against the Seattle Seahawks. So again, it is a setback, but actually in some ways, I'm trying to look for the silver lining in every cloud, and I'm trying to say, okay, mentally, the Lions needed this to happen, so that way they can keep themselves on the right mental, railroad tracks. But it is a setback. However, though, the Lions are still in a decent position. They're second place in the NFC North right now. The only reason they're second place, despite having the same overall record as the Packers, is because they have a worse conference record, and they have a worse division record than the Packers, despite having a 1-1 record just like the Packers. That's why the Lions are in second place to the Packers. But otherwise, they have the same record. Doesn't matter. But now we have to look at the fact that the Lions are bringing the Atlanta Falcons into their home turf, just like last week, or just like this week against the Seattle Seahawks. They're going to do that next week against the Atlanta Falcons. And again, it is a winnable game. I'm not saying that the Lions are definitely going to win it, but it is a winnable game. And if the Lions are able to correct the mistakes that they did this game, they should win against the Atlanta Falcons and get back on the right track. But anyway, folks, with that having been said, I figured that was a good way to kind of start the week off, kind of explain in a generic sense what was going on here, so that way we can start getting into the more specific stuff and try and clear up all this negativity nonsense before it gets too crazy out of hand. And then we can start getting into more specific stuff as far as film study, and then start looking at the freaking Atlanta Falcons here. So with that being said, folks, I just want to say thank you all for watching yet another episode of MCM, Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage you all to do one of these three things. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not yet had a chance to do so, I highly encourage you all to make sure you turn that bell notification icon at the bottom so that way you continue to make sure you always get the content that I'm pushing out. I highly encourage you all please to do so because it helps the channel as we are regrowing from where we used to be on my previous channel. And I also highly encourage y'all to do this. Please share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, so that way we can continue to grow and can continue to actually get more people onto this channel and make this channel what it used to be. So with that having been said, folks, I just want to say thank you all for watching the content. Thank you all for coming back. Thank you all for your view. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you all for your support. And with that, I just want to say God bless. Thank you all for tuning in to MCM. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.